Welcome to Mastering Your Financial Life, hosted by Judy Heft, the founder and CEO of Judy Heft and Associates, Financial and Lifestyle Concierge. This year, she's celebrating 27 years in business. In every episode, Judy interviews professionals who help others successfully manage their financial lives. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Judy is the author of 2 books, How to Be Smart, Successful, and Organized with Your Money for a Better Today and Tomorrow, and her latest book, Mastering Your Financial Life Cycles, How to Successfully Manage Money in Every Decade of Life. You can read chapters of her books and catch prior episodes of the show at www.judithheft.com. Now, here's the host of Mastering Your Financial Life, Judy Heft.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to episode 84 of Mastering Your Financial Life. And today I'm really thrilled and excited to be here with Stephanie Rodin. Stephanie is a healthcare attorney, and she works with professionals of all different medical fields. She helps healthcare practices from anything from setting up employment agreements to selling their practices. She keeps her clients and she helps her clients figure out their best practices and then, renews their best practices with her clients, and really is a great advocate for her clients too. So I'm really excited. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Judy. I'm so excited to be on. I can't believe 84 episods. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun too. And it's been a few years.
Yeah.
So, how did you end up in the healthcare professional field as an attorney?
So it's sort of a weird story. I come from a family of doctors, so I've been around it my entire life, and I never wanted to be one. It was the one thing that I never wanted to do. I wanted to get away from it. I wanted to do something totally different that no one in my family did. So I went into accounting. And when I was taking the courses for accounting, we had to take Intro to Business Law. And I fell in love with law. So that got me to go to law school. And then I'm in law school, not thinking anything about healthcare or doctors or anything else, still wanting to be as far away from like family as I can be. And everywhere I turned, somehow medical came up. I was on law review. My topic was medical devices and the FDA. Okay, so I'm like researching it and doing it. I'm like, all right, fine. Third year, I ended up doing a rotation at the Massachusetts Public Health Department. So I was helping with healthcare. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then my first clerkship was with a judge in Massachusetts who ended up always doing personal injury, car accidents, slip and falls, things like that. And for whatever reason, that summer only did medical malpractice cases. So something was telling me that I can't get away from it. My first job out, I interviewed, and this was way back in the day where everything was a blind listing. It was through the New York Law Journal. You faxed in your resume. And I go in for an interview, and the owner starts asking me questions about law, like what I would do, handle a case, all normal. And then all of a sudden says, so do you have any knowledge about dentistry? and my dad now is a retired dentist, but was working at the time. And I said, well, yeah, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, are you talking about 1 through 32, the teeth numbers? You're talking about crown and bridges. You're talking about Invisalign. You're talking about, implants, crowns. And he's like, how do you know all this? And I go, well, my dad's a dentist. I used to work in his practice. So he's like, oh, you're hired. Started doing malpractice work for plaintiffs. And that's what got me into the field. So all of my knowledge of working with my dad, of being around dentistry and medical, somehow made my legal career. And I did the litigation for close to 10 years. And then I decided I wanted to open up my own practice to really focus on the business management of my clients. And that's what I do now. I do all the transactional work and helping them, as you indicated before, about the employment agreement, setting up their practices, drafting their consent forms, like doing everything that they can to be protected so that they can concentrate on the care that they're providing to their patients.
So I guess there's an expression in Yiddish, it was beschert.
Yes.
Definitely meant to be, for those who
Yep.
don't know what that means. But yeah, it sounds like that's an interesting journey that got you back into the medical field, but you're in a different area of it.
Yep.
So it must be kind of fun to talk to your family a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. So the first 2 years of my career, I did plaintiff work, and no one in my family spoke to me. Holidays were very uncomfortable because I was suing doctors and dentists. I mean, that's what I did. When I switched over to the defense side, I got back into everyone's good graces, and it's been fine ever since.
That's good. That makes a lot more sense too.
Yes.
We don't want you alienated from the family just because of your career.
Exactly. No, it was fun, but I mean, I just never thought this is what I would do, and I love it. But when I was first starting, you just never think about like where it's going, and what paths are going to lead you to exactly what it is that, gives you joy in your career.
It's so true. I think you were on an interesting journey, a few zigs and zags that got you back to where you were meant to be.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Cool. That's interesting.
Exactly.
So what's the biggest change in your practice over years? I mean, I think that, in the law field anyway, there's lots of changes in all different fields. But what have you seen in your field?
I mean, there's been changes with employment agreements and with, the rules per state, like I'm licensed in, New York, New Jersey. We also practice down in Florida because I have employees down there. But, every state is different. Every state has their own little nuances. And it's just a matter of really trying to figure out what works best for our clients. But most recently, which comes into play, and it's interesting that this podcast came up now, is because non-competes are now going to be considered null and void for all employment agreements starting September 4th because of the Federal Trade Commission. And that's going to go into play. And that's very new. And that's going to change everything, because one of the biggest things that my clients were most concerned with, especially the ones that owned practices, was having these non-competes so that they don't have the competition if an employee works with them for X number of years, understands their practice, and then they open up right next door so that the patients are conveniently able to now follow, and then they lose revenue. And without the non-competes, I really think it's going to change the landscape of how people practice and what happens and the competition and what information they may allow their employees to now have access to, knowing that they don't have a non-compete in place. And I really think it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out how this really impacts practices. The individuals are going to love it because now they can go wherever, and there's no competition. There's no nothing. I mean, if they want to go from hospital to hospital, they can. They want to work in a practice that's a block away or a mile away, they're going to be able to do it. So for them, the growth of their career is going to be limitless. And that's wonderful. But it's the practices, I feel, that are really going to have a problem with this.
So Stephanie, I would think that when the employees sign on with these practitioners, they sign a confidentiality agreement, and there must be HIPAA laws too. So
Yeah.
How does that affect the non-compete?
So the non-compete really is strictly about a geographical restriction for a particular number of years after termination, right? That was what the non-compete was.
Mm-hmm.
There's still other restrictive covenants. So you still have the non-solicitation of patients and employees, right? You still have the confidentiality, so the non-disclosure restriction. So any information that they learn while they're employed, they're not allowed to share. And HIPAA is the federal rule that covers everything when it relates to patient information, protected health information, and everything else. You still have the non-interference, which is more about the third-party associate. So all of those will still be in place, but if you're working right next door, you don't have to now solicit the patients because the patients are going to be right there.
So your sign, you can hang your shingle up, right?
So the non-solicitation, although it'll still be enforced, it's still in place, it's still viable. Depending upon where a past employee opens up, it may be pointless. It may be. Again, this is all to be determined. Confidentiality will still apply, no question. And they can still be in breach if they use what's considered confidential information for the practice, which is anything that's not of public information, salaries, fee schedules, marketing structure, advertising, things like that. They're not allowed to use it for their own benefit. They're not allowed to share it. That will still always apply. But the big thing is the revenue generator, and the revenue generator is about the patients. And if you can now work conveniently in a close proximity to where you used to work, and patients are always allowed to follow a provider, and now it's that easy to follow a provider, it could create problems for a practice. It could. Again, we don't know because it's brand new.
So a few years ago, I had an employee that gave their notice and left. And then I had a client that gave their notice and left. And it turned out that I found out that the employee took my client away, and they had a non-compete and non-solicitation. But, you know, it was such a sticky situation because it was a nonprofit, and the board member that referred the client to me was a very, very good client, one of my older, you know, longer lasting clients. So I tried it with a cease and desist, and the company, the nonprofit, went crazy on me, and they were all very upset. And to save my other client who was more important to me, I just let her go, you know, but I said, don't take any other clients. You can't do that. I'll let you take this one particular one, which she did. But it was just really, it feels like such a slap in the face when that happens. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and that's what it is. It's like, you know, you open up your practice, your business to your employees. You teach them. You want them to grow. You want them to be a part of your business, right? So you showing them all of the loopholes and the links and all of the, you know, everything that makes you and that your business profitable. You're opening them up to and introducing them to your clients. And, you know, sometimes, you know, people want to leave, they want to grow, they want to open up their own practice, but you have to have trust that your clients aren't going to go, or that they're not going to try to take your clients because they're looking for a way out. And it's a really difficult thing because, yes, clients or anyone are allowed to choose who they use professionally. You know, that's not the problem. The problem is you leave, you know, or an employee leaves, and then they reach out to the clients like, hey, we built such a fantastic relationship together. I'd like to continue working with you. I'm starting on my own. I can give you that really personal, continued experience that you've had at cheaper rates because I can give you a discount of being like my main client. Come. A lot of clients, if they have that, you know, that rapport, may take them up on it. And that becomes the problem for the practice and the business.
That's exactly what happened in this situation. The bookkeeper had a rapport with the client, and it was just, you know, it was just, instead of aggravating myself for the rest of my life, I just said, go, take it. You know, I still think about it once in a while. It's annoying. More than anything. And it didn't really hurt my business that much because I have a good growing business, but still, it's just a slap in the face when you're good to an employee and then they turn around and they do that.
And that's what for me, that's what the non-competes did. You know, it gave the practices and the owners a little bit of breathing room to know that, okay, I can't prevent them from working ever. I can't prevent them from working everywhere, but I'm hoping that they're not going to be so convenient where patients are going to say, oh, hey, I can just follow this person, as opposed to saying, I'm working at this practice. I'm getting my care by this practice. I'm going to stick with this practice as opposed to going with the provider.
Some people are loyal and some people aren't.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. You know, and again, patients and clients, they're not enslaved to any one place. You know, they have the right to do that. It's just, I think it's going to create in the very beginning, because it's going to be new. No one knows how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be a little tricky because practices have to give notices. They have to give a notice to all of their employees that the non-competes are no longer enforceable. It applies retroactively. So for all time. So
what do you mean retroactive? It goes back to date of hire?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So the only ones it doesn't go against are what's considered executives, managers. So if there's a non-compete to an existing supervisor or executor that manages, that will still stay in place for that contract. But moving forward, any new contract with them will not apply. but everyone else is done. Now, this is only for employment agreements. It's not for the buy and sell of practices. Those non-competes still are viable and enforceable. It's only with employment.
I see. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Things we don't think about every day.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's, lucky me, I mean, as much as I enjoy it, like I know how much this is going to like create problems, in making sure everyone understands, redoing all the employment agreements, making sure that the practices are protected. Maybe now they're going to change the language with the other restrictive covenants to make them a little bit more enforceable, like a little bit more defined, a little bit more stricter, so that they have more protections now that they don't have the non-compete.
Interesting stuff. So let's take a little break here, and we're going to come back and talk to Stephanie Rodin, healthcare attorney, a little bit more.
Hey there. I just want to tell you a little bit about my new book that just came out called Mastering Your Financial Life Cycles. And here it is. It's how to successfully manage your money in every decade of life. I co-authored this with my CFO, Liz Levy. And together we created this manual that's going to help you through every stage of life. We talk about having a baby. We talk about young adulthood, pre-retirement, what to do when you're at that age of retirement. If you're contemplating divorce, do you need an estate plan? We cover all of these, each subject in a different chapter. And I really think that you're going to find this so helpful, because at the end of every chapter, we have checklists that you can look at and you can use, and they can be a guide for you. So this is a wonderful manual that we've created. It's available on Amazon. You can also find it on our website at judithheft.com/book. And we're here for you. If you need anything, reach out. I hope you enjoy the book. Here's another picture of it, just so you know what's going on. Here it is. And I'm really proud of it. It's my second book. And I'd love to have you read it and give me your feedback. Judy Heft, judithheft.com, financial and lifestyle concierge, celebrating 26 years in business. And over the years, I've learned so much. And what I've been trying to do is impart a little bit of this knowledge to you, so I can help all of you become as financially organized as I am.
And we're back. Welcome back with Stephanie Rodin. So Stephanie, we talked a little bit, some of the upcoming challenges that, you think that it's going to be. I mean, I think that's going to be for all businesses with the non-compete.
Absolutely.
But, what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the success stories that you've turned around from challenges that clients have had?
So as my practice has grown, and I've, been around, I've been practicing for close to 24 years. I've been in my practice for 14 years as of this month.
That's not possible. I don't believe.
There's more complexity in a lot of my cases. And the complex ones are really the ones where my client is either purchasing or selling a practice, because there's so much involved to make sure that whichever party you're representing, nothing comes back after closing that should be the responsibility of the other party. So for instance, if you're representing the seller, the seller is allowed to collect their accounts receivable. So you want to make sure that they still have access to the information so they can still get money owed to them for services rendered prior to closing. And there are some buyers that want to restrict it, or they want to end up having a fee involved if they do it for them. They only want to do it for a certain period of time. Maybe, they want to get paid for services that they're rendering on the day, even if that patient owes the seller money. So there's all these little restrictions, and a lot of issues start to come out after closing if the contract isn't clear and isn't direct and isn't written in a way that can really protect the seller or the purchaser, depending upon which side that you're representing. I've had a lot of cases recently that have created a lot of problems way after the fact. So it's not like immediate. It can be 2 or 3 months later, and all of a sudden my client will reach out and be like, all right, I'm having a hard time. I can't do XYZ, but I thought the contract said that I'm allowed to do this. And I have to get involved in order to talk to, the attorney, or maybe even have emails written by me to go out to the buyer or the seller in order to get this done. And there's always something. And thankfully, with the exception of maybe one, which is still ongoing and is a little bit of a mess, not by my doing, but just in general, I'm always able to really help my clients make sure that they get what they're supposed to, that they get what they deserve in the sense of the money, the closing, that they're not responsible for the liabilities post-closing if they don't have to be, and I'm always able to do that. But there's always something. And those are the biggest challenges, is to make sure that nothing blows back on your client after the closing of the matter.
So are you writing the buy-sell agreements? Do you do that? Or
I do. I do.
Okay. So you
yeah,
do.
I do. So there's challenges to that because, every case is different. I mean, you have your templates and you have certain clauses that don't change, but if you're dealing with dentists as opposed to physicians, it's very different, because for dentistry, you have remakes, you have work in progress, because dentistry doesn't always happen in one sitting. I mean, if you're doing an implant, you have extraction, you have the abutment, you have the implant, you have the crown. I mean, there's stages. And if you sell in the middle of those stages, what happens? What happens if the patient paid in full already? What happens if the patient still owes money and now the buyer's doing it? How do you break down the percentages? What if they had a payment plan in place? How does that work? So these are all things that you need to figure out before closing to make sure that it's clear in the contract so that the correct party is making the money for the services that they're rendering post-closing.
Well, there's so much to think about that I don't think people think about, I'm going to sell my business. And then when I sell it at closing, I'm done, or I'm working for however many years you have to stay on to be a consultant. But then some things that if you don't have a good attorney can come back and slap you in the face, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, look, I mean, there's never a contract that's perfect. That's, we all know this, right? They can only be as perfect as the circumstances and the information that you receive. But you try to do as much as possible. And my contracts have changed through time because of issues that have come up with clients, because of post-closing concerns that have come up, and the language has been tweaked accordingly. I mean, that's how contracts grow, is because of those issues that you don't know about all of a sudden come into play. So now you don't ever want that to happen again.
And we don't know, right?
Exactly. Until it happens and you're like, oh no, okay, let's figure this out for the next client. And that's the growth of the contracts.
But I think it's really cool that you have such a vast knowledge of the dental industry, because you grew up in it and you, like you said, you worked for your dad. So you knew all these things that if you asked me how many teeth were in people's mouth, 32, maybe you said that earlier. I'm thinking I probably would have had to take a rough guess. I probably didn't remember.
Yeah, it was. So I used to do dental malpractice work. And I used to look at x-rays and, the dental records all day long for my clients. And I remember it was 1 year I was having a little bit of pain on my lower right, and I have a filling there. And I'm just like, something's off. So I called my dad, who was still practicing, and I said to him, I'm just like, I need to come in. I need you to take a look at this. And he's like, okay. So I go into the office and he's like, all right, well, what am I doing? I'm just like, well, I need you to take a periapical, and then I need you to do a bite registration. And then probably you're going to have to file down the filling in 230. And he's like, could you let me do my work? So he ends up doing it. And he goes, yeah, your filling was a little high. It was creating a little bit of a difference of your bite based upon the registration. So yeah, that's what we did. He's like, how did you do that? I'm like, all I do is look at x-rays. Like, it's all I do. So I'm just, I can look at an x-ray and know where all the nerves are, where the teeth are, what's, whether you've had endo work or whatever. I haven't done it in a while, but that never leaves your mind. It just doesn't. Right. And it helps. It definitely helps when I'm working with dentists because, I understand their language. I understand what's needed to protect them. I understand the work. I understand the staging that maybe some others don't because they're not as entranced in it and they haven't been around it as much. Mm-hmm. So it definitely is helpful.
That's great. So what kind of medical professionals do you work with? What kind of doctors and dentists, anyone, or how does that work?
Yeah. So it's really anyone who falls underneath the big umbrella of healthcare, and it's a huge umbrella. So it's, dentists of all specialties. So you have endo, oral, prosto, perio, peds, doesn't matter, right? Then you have, for physicians, I've worked with general, so it's the internist, I've worked with cardiologists, I've worked with derm, I've worked with plastic surgeons, I've worked with ortho, I've worked with anesthesiologists, I've worked with emergency care. It really runs the gamut. And although the law is the same because it's healthcare, right? The employment agreements or the agreements or the contracts that they're working on, they change ever so slightly because of the specialty. So like, for instance, where for dental, you have remakes and work in progress and things like that, you know, derm, you have the cost of consumables being removed from their pay because of Botox and injectables and things like that. So there's like little things, the percentages are different. You have the difference between medical service versus cosmetic services when you're dealing with derm. You know, when you're dealing with plastics, you know, they have bigger type of surgery. So they may have a bigger payment up front for financial. So the financial forms are different. They're not just standard, you know. The majority of my clients are out of network, but when you're dealing with insurance, then comes into Medicare. So you have to draft things. So every practice is different. And it's what keeps me going, because there's never, like, again, we have templates, but nothing is ever the same. And to me, it's just so interesting to draft it, to make sure the language is correct, to make sure that my clients are protected so that they don't have to worry. And I love doing it. And I do the research. If there's something that I'm, you know, want to make sure that we have all of the updated information on. And I love it. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just great.
I can hear it in your voice. That's great. So yeah, this is great, Stephanie. So now I know who to call when I need a specialist in some area. You know all the best doctors, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Great. So how can our listeners find you?
So you can reach me at Stephanie@RodinLegal.com. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to guide any way that I can. You can look at my website, RodinLegal.com. You know, I have a podcast myself called Speaking with Steph. Judy, I definitely want to have you on it because I want to hear about your background and get some more information about you. And you can talk about your books because I would love to get more information about that. But yeah, I mean, you know, my LinkedIn profile, I mean, I'm around on social media. You know, there's a lots of ways to get me, but the easiest to go through my websites or email me directly at Stephanie@RodinLegal.com.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a really interesting guest, Stephanie. I learned a lot too.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. This was so much fun.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into Mastering Your Financial Life, hosted by Judy Heft. You can read chapters of her books and catch prior episodes of the show at www.judithheft.com. Thank you for your positive comments and sharing this show with others.